Well, once again, it's Jeff Adler here with our continuing video series following up my book, Why I'm Right. This is Why I'm Right 2.0. Today we're going to talk about a much argued topic called the slippery slope. But before we get into that, I want to remind everybody to please share my videos if you are so inclined. Tell everybody that you know, pass along, send them to it. They're now going to be on. They now are on YouTube. You can find it by my name. You can use keywords like conservatism or Republican or political philosophy, things like that I've put in there for you. So feel free to do that. I'd appreciate it if you would. Whether you are in complete, total agreement with me or no. Anyway, so with that being said, I wanted to get into a topic that is argued about a lot because there are some people, mostly on the left, that say that there's no such thing as a slippery slope. It's a fallacy. That the premise behind it is that one little insignificant thing, event, fact, whatever, can lead to some catastrophic or otherwise detrimental event down the road. And well, if anyone understands the butterfly effect, they would know that that actually can happen. But my thinking about the slippery slope is not so dramatic. It's actually much more reasonable, I think, and it's easier to follow than waiting for some little thing to turn into a big thing. Historically, the slippery slope could probably be applied to lots of things historically, but with regard to our current situation in our country, politically speaking, the current slope, one might say, probably started about 50 or so years ago when the liberals took over the culture of our country. Prior to, say, 1962, 3, 4, somewhere in there, conservatives, for the most part, and conservatism, conservative values held sway in this country. And through a series of events, the free speech movement at Berkeley, the beatniks becoming hippies, becoming psychedelic flower children, and then growing up and moving into places of power in order to continue their control and dominance over our culture, becoming politicians, lawyers, professors, and whatnot. This movement to alter our culture has been going on for quite a long time now. And through a lot of this, there have been certain issues which, back when they started, were taboo. And back when they started in the early 60s, trying to, even then, fundamentally change the country, after losing battle after battle, trying to do it in other ways, they came upon an idea, a theory known as gradualism or incrementalism. The idea that if you can achieve a goal in little baby steps, but in and of itself, that's applied in lots of our daily lives, that theory. But their way of doing it was far more insidious, because the idea that the reason they wanted to do it was because they figured you could slowly convince people to what you want to do by achieving little baby steps. In other words, making them only have to change their thinking or their comfort zone a little bit with something that sounds reasonable, something that sounds rational, something that is shrouded in protecting children or protecting victim groups or protecting the elderly, protecting the sick, blah, blah, blah. And in so doing, and tapping that little compassion button we all have, people would be willing to accept that little change with some assumption that nothing else might change down the road. And we move in that direction. Nobody may even notice that we moved in that direction, and the direction I'm referring to, of course, is left. Most people are like, okay, whatever. How many of you people have woken up one day and thought about what's gone on in the last 20 years and said, how the hell did we get here? Well, how did we got here was incrementalism, or the slippery slope. Another tactic used by the left to accomplish this is what's called precedence. This is a legal thing. By slowly, in courtrooms, with the right judge willing to legislate from the bench, going back decades, and I mean even more than 50 years, I mean going back to the beginning of the 20th century, there have been a number of judges who have been known to pontificate beyond their scope of their job titles in order to move the country in a certain direction that they and their ilk deemed proper. Despite the warnings of the Founding Fathers, despite the letter of the law in the Constitution and the enumerated powers of the judiciary, they would decide that they had power they did not actually have, and rule in a certain way, creating a precedence, and upon which other legal issues can be built. Another form of incrementalism. Throughout the 20th century, precedents had been created, which allowed all sorts of abhorrent rulings to occur down the road based on really, really bad law. Roe versus Wade, for instance, is a perfect example of a constitutional amendment that was based on precedents that became horrible law, unconstitutional from its inception. Jane Roe, a woman who was the plaintiff, was later on changed her mind and decided that she was no longer in favor of the abortion that she was the centerpiece of that for. In fact, she just passed away yesterday, so we tip our hats to her. She saw the light and the abhorrence of abortion and wished she had never had anything to do with Roe versus Wade. But we'll get into abortion on another one. Trust me. That one you will not want to miss either. Anyway, but it's an example of how things can go awry in a courtroom, and even as high as the Supreme Court, when you have bad precedents, creating bad law, creating bad, along the way, bad decisions, or somebody trying to decide something they have no business deciding, outside the scope of the law or the Constitution. Now, culturally, the liberals also try to pull these shenanigans, and there are basically 5 stages that I've discovered by watching over 30 years of watching politics, how they go about getting you from A to Z. How they get you from a position where you are intolerant of something to a position where it is now completely part of our culture, and the steps they take to get you there. So I have a little graph, the old whiteboard coming into play, and you can see I have my little slope here, and the first stage, number 1, is tolerance. It was once said by somebody that tolerance is the the way somebody who has no convictions. It's for the man who has no convictions. Now, tolerance can be a good thing, especially if you're talking about live and let live, and I mean that in a libertarian way, like, I don't care what you do behind closed doors. I don't care what you do as long as it's not hurting my rights, hurting other people. It's not indoctrinating anybody. It's not spreading, because if it were natural, it would spread naturally. But if it's not, it shouldn't. But, to each his own, but, I don't want to hear about it. But the tolerance that they're talking about, that we're talking about in the slippery slope here, is that through their very powerful tool of political correctness, they're going to force society to tolerate things they had not previously wished to tolerate. Now, again, in order to achieve tolerance of something, they shroud it in some kind of compassionate shell, hiding the true nugget. And what's the truth about this? Is what do we know about liberals? Is some absolute, unequivocal, and inarguable truth. It is never enough. With liberals, it is never enough. If you give them an inch, they will take a mile. If you give them a mile, they'll take 10 miles. It is never enough. So, whatever you think they want something more. Maybe they haven't mentioned what that is yet, but it's a-comin'. Trust me. So, tolerance. Step one. What more do they want? That's what everybody should have asked and should still ask when dealing with liberals. There's something hidden, an agenda, an ideology, a goal that they're trying to get, and this is a step in that in getting that goal. Now, we could be in any number of the stages, but you can still ask yourself, pretty much at any stage, what more do they want? When it was just tolerance, for instance, let's take homosexuality. It doesn't matter what the thing is. It could be abortion, it could be whatever. That might have been all fine and dandy, but it was not what they were. That was not their goal. The goal was not to make everyone tolerant, meaning able to just deal with the fact that there is something going on, and as long as it's not involving me, I can live with it. I can tolerate it. But no, once everyone was basically on board with tolerance, here comes the next shot across the bow, and that is step 2, which is acceptance. There is a difference between tolerance and acceptance. And in this case, acceptance meaning that we accept the premise of whatever it is the liberals are trying to force feed into society. If they say that homosexuality is natural, normal, whatever the word is, and I'm not saying it isn't natural, I'm not saying it isn't normal, I'm just saying whatever it is they're trying to say. They're trying to say abortion is a good thing, which a lot of them do today. They want your acceptance. They want you to accept the premise they are pushing. It could be a complete lie. It could be a straw man argument. It could be completely ridiculous, but they are achieving acceptance. Except they're not just achieving acceptance, because you have to ask, what more do they want? Because with liberals, it's never enough. So we have stage 3. Stage 3, approval. Now we're at a point in our culture where it's not enough to deal with them, tolerate them, It's not enough to approve or accept their premise. Now we actually have to approve of the lifestyle. We have to approve, agree with the behavior, the act, the issue, the whatever. We actually are now being coerced into by being pounded into us. TV shows, movie, news, radio, magazines, newspapers, every part of our culture, Hollywood coming at us from all angles all the time, showing how we, if we don't accept and approve exactly what they're dishing out, we're in the wrong. We're to be marginalized. We are to be ostracized. We are to be called out as being insensitive. And political correctness, the tool that they used, which we'll get into in more depth later, has a lot of sharp edges. And there's a lot of words that they can throw and bandy about to force the issue, to force you into the belief that they want you to believe. Bigotry, homophobia, Islamophobia, xenophobia, misogyny. There's, it never really ends. Discrimination. What is discrimination? Discrimination is overused like a lot of words, and we'll get into one in the next part here. It means to discriminate. People have different tastes. People have different desires, different wants. They have different likes and dislikes. It's human traits. Some of them are inside. We can't even tell how they got there. We like blue, not green. We like black, not white. We like men, not women. Sometimes we don't know why. Sometimes we do. We have a preference. We discriminate. We have discriminating tastes. I like steak, not liver. Ugh. This kind of stuff. Does that make you wrong? No, it makes you human. But they use the word discriminate as a bad word all the time. But it's really not always being applied by us in a negative way. It's only us applying our trait in a natural way. And we'll get into that other overused word and the remainder of the slippery slope in the next segment. See ya.